What if I told you that the most conservative franchise in the NFL just became its most unpredictable? For decades, the Pittsburgh Steelers were known for patience, drafting and developing, and never making splashy moves. But in 6 months, this same franchise traded away their all-pro safety, signed a 41-year-old quarterback who had a disappointing tenure with the Jets, and handed out a $150 million contract to a receiver they'd never met. From Ben Roethlisberger's retirement in January 2022 to Aaron Rodgers signing in June 2025, the Steelers endured 3 years of quarterback purgatory. They cycled through 4 different starting quarterbacks and watched their offense become one of the NFL's most anemic units. In the 2022 and 2023 seasons, their quarterbacks combined for just 20 passing touchdowns, a number Ben used to approach in a single season. But now, with Omar Khan pulling off blockbuster trades, Mike Tomlin finally having the pieces he's been waiting for, and Aaron Rodgers declaring 2025 will be his final season, the Steel City is buzzing with championship hopes for the first time in nearly a decade. This is the Pittsburgh Steelers Renaissance, the story of how football's most traditional franchise became its most aggressive, and why 2025 might be their last shot at capturing that elusive 7th Super Bowl championship. When Ben Roethlisberger posted that retirement video on January 27th, 2022, nobody was prepared for what came next. "The time has come to clean out my locker, hang up my cleats," Big Ben said, ending one of the most successful quarterback careers in NFL history. The numbers were staggering: 165 wins, 418 passing touchdowns, 64,088 passing yards, 2 Super Bowl championships, and 18 seasons without a losing record. For 2 decades, the Steelers had a Hall of Fame quarterback who gave them a championship chance every season. What they had no idea about was the nightmare that would follow. The 2022 season began with optimism. The Steelers signed Mitchell Trubisky and drafted Kenny Pickett 20th overall, their first quarterback in the first round since Ben. Instead, they got a nightmare. Trubisky lasted 3 games before being benched after completing just 59.5% of his passes. Pickett showed flashes, but over 2 seasons managed just 4,474 passing yards, 13 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. The 2023 season offered false hope with a 10-7 record and wild card berth, but it was Mason Rudolph, not Pickett, who got hot down the stretch. The season ended with a 31-17 loss to Buffalo. In March 2024, Khan traded Pickett to Philadelphia in a package that included a 2024 third-round pick and 2 2025 seventh-rounders. The message was clear. Even their own front office didn't believe he was the answer. So they tried veterans. Justin Fields, acquired from Chicago, started the 2024 season and led the team to a 4-2 record. Mid-season, Russell Wilson, signed from Denver, took over and helped the Steelers reach a 10-3 record. However, the team lost its final 5 games, including a 28-14 playoff loss to Baltimore. In 3 seasons since Ben's retirement, Steelers quarterbacks combined for just 46 passing touchdowns. Remarkably, the Steelers went 2-0 in games without scoring a touchdown in 2024. The rest of the NFL went 4-29 in such games. Despite this dysfunction, they managed a 29-22 record, a testament to Tomlin's coaching and their defense. That's when everything changed. The breaking point came when Art Rooney II was asked about quarterbacks for the 100th time. "We need to explore every potential avenue," Rooney said with unusual edge. "Whether that's free agency, trades, or the draft, everything is on the table." For a franchise built on patience, those words represented a seismic shift. The man tasked with solutions was Omar Khan, the longtime cap guy who became something nobody expected, a revolutionary. Tomlin called him the con artist for pulling off impossible trades and signings. The catalyst came in March 2025 when DK Metcalf requested a trade from Seattle. The old Steelers would have walked away from a $30 million receiver. Khan doubled down, recognizing their championship window was closing. Tomlin was 53 with 0 playoff wins since 2016. TJ Watt was entering his final contract year. Cameron Hayward was 36 Their defensive core was too good to waste on quarterback development. The Aaron Rodgers courtship lasted 6 months, from December 2024 to June 2025. The 41-year-old had just been released by the Jets after a tumultuous tenure. Torn Achilles in 2023, 5-12 record in 2024. Rodgers took his time, attending parties and concerts, while the football world waited. Tomlin called him weekly, understanding the quarterback was dealing with personal issues. "I was dealing with a lot of things in my personal life," Rodgers later revealed, "and some things improved where I felt like I could fully be all in." On June 6, 2025, Rodgers signed a 1-year, $13.65 million contract with $10 million guaranteed. "This was really about finishing with a lot of love and fun and peace," he explained. "What better place to finish than in one of the cornerstone franchises of the NFL with Mike Tomlin?" But Khan was just getting started. In March, he'd pulled off the defining trade: DK Metcalf from Seattle for a 2025 second-round pick. Metcalf immediately signed a 4-year, $132 million extension, creating a 5-year, $150 million commitment at $30 million per year. For an organization that never spent like this, it was revolutionary. The Metcalf trade created ripple effects. George Pickens, despite 1,140 yards in 2023, had become problematic with sideline incidents and attitude issues. When ESPN reported the Steelers made the evaluation that Pickens and Rodgers probably would not hit it off, Pickens was traded to Dallas for a 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 pick swap on May 7th. "I forced my way out," Pickens later admitted. But Khan wasn't done reshaping the roster. On June 30th, 2025, he pulled off perhaps his most shocking move yet, trading away Minkah Fitzpatrick, the All-Pro safety, who had been a cornerstone of the defense since arriving from Miami in 2019. The trade sent shockwaves through Steelers Nation. Fitzpatrick to Miami for Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, and pick swaps seemed impossible until it happened, but the numbers told the story of why Khan was willing to make such a dramatic move. Fitzpatrick's 2024 season had been disappointing by his standards. His 68.4 PFF grade ranked 52nd out of 171 safeties, a far cry from his all-pro form earlier in his Pittsburgh tenure. More damning was his lack of impact plays. Just 1 interception in the previous 2 seasons, combined after recording 6 picks in 2022. Meanwhile, the Steelers were getting back to immediate upgrades. Jalen Ramsey, despite being 30 years old, had graded out as the 16th best cornerback in the NFL in 2024 with a 76.9 PFF score. His 24 career interceptions and elite run defense, 85.7 PFF grade, 10th among corners, made him a perfect fit for the Steelers' defensive scheme. Even better was the addition of Jonnu Smith, who was projected to thrive in 2025 after joining the Steelers following a productive 2024 with Atlanta. While not a Pro Bowler yet, he had shown flashes of becoming a versatile receiving threat, especially when paired with Arthur Smith, who had previously coached him in Tennessee and Atlanta. The Steelers agreed to take on the bulk of Ramsey's contract, $26.6 million, for 2025 after a $1.5 million raise, while also giving Smith a 1-year, $12 million extension. The financial commitments were mounting, but Khan was operating under a simple philosophy: championship windows don't stay open forever. All of these moves were building toward 2025, but Khan still had to address the long-term future. That's where the 2025 NFL draft became crucial, and once again, the Steelers defied expectations. With Shedeur Sanders available when Pittsburgh picked 21st overall, many expected the Steelers to address their post-Rodgers future immediately. Instead, Khan and the coaching staff stayed true to their defensive identity, selecting Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon with their first-round pick. "We had extreme urgency to address the defensive line," Mike Tomlin explained, "and certainly Derek Harmon fits that bill. We like his physical stature. We like his style of play. It's just what we covet and what we need." The selection was a direct response to their playoff loss to Baltimore, when Derrick Henry's 20-yard touchdown run exposed the Steelers' inability to stop power running games. Harmon, who led the FBS with 34 quarterback pressures as a defensive tackle and had a 10.7% pressure rate, represented the kind of physical, disruptive presence they needed up front. The Steelers continued emphasizing physicality throughout the draft. Iowa running back Caleb Johnson, selected in the 3rd round with the 83rd overall pick, brought a bruising style and 29 consecutive games without a lost fumble. At 6'1" and 224 pounds, Johnson's physicality and ball security made him the ideal complement to Jaylen Warren. In the 4th round, Pittsburgh added pass rush depth by selecting Ohio State edge rusher Jack Sawyer with the 123rd overall pick. Sawyer had recorded 9 sacks during his final college season and finished his Buckeye career with 23 sacks and 29 tackles for loss, offering an immediate rotational presence behind TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. They kept bolstering the trenches in the 5th round, drafting Iowa defensive tackle Yahya Black at 164th overall. A versatile lineman with size and length, Black had earned honorable mention All Big Ten honors in both 2023 and 2024, and gave the Steelers a developmental interior presence with scheme versatility. But the most intriguing selection came in the 6th round, when the Steelers finally addressed the quarterback position. With the 185th pick, Pittsburgh selected Ohio State quarterback Will Howard, who had transferred from Kansas State before the 2024 season. Howard showed promise at Ohio State, delivering strong performances, though exact statistics from his single season as a Buckeye aren't publicly confirmed. "I really wanted to be a Steeler," Howard revealed on Ben Roethlisberger's podcast. When you're going through the draft process, especially as a quarterback, there are only a couple of teams that are most likely gonna pick you. But there was something deep inside me that just really wanted to be a Steeler. The decision to draft Howard in the 6th round, rather than Shedeur Sanders in the 1st, perfectly encapsulated the Steelers' 2025 approach. They were going all in on the present with Aaron Rodgers, but still kept an eye on the future by bringing in a high upside developmental quarterback to learn behind a Hall of Famer. By July 2025, Omar Khan had completely transformed the Steelers roster. The once conservative franchise that rarely made splash moves had traded for a superstar receiver, signed a future Hall of Fame quarterback, swapped all-pro defenders, and committed over $200 million in new contracts. The moves were so unprecedented that Art Rooney II rewarded Khan with a 3-year contract extension on July 3rd, locking up the architect of the team's transformation through the 2028 season. Omar and his team have done a great job over the past 3 years in constructing our roster through the NFL draft, strategic trades, and free agency, Rooney said in announcing the extension. "We look forward to continuing that trend that will lead to even more success on the field." Khan's response was telling. "I believe we are building a championship roster and look forward to the 2025 season and beyond, as our goals continue to be to bring another Super Bowl to the city of Pittsburgh and our great fans, building a championship roster." After 3 years of quarterback mediocrity and playoff disappointment, the Steelers were finally swinging for the fences. When Aaron Rodgers walked into the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex for the first time as a Pittsburgh Steeler on June 10th, 2025, he wasn't just joining a new team, he was inheriting the most talented roster the franchise had assembled in over a decade. The offensive transformation was staggering. For the first time since Ben Roethlisberger's prime, the Steelers had a legitimate number 1 receiver in DK Metcalf. The 6'4" speedster brought a combination of size, athleticism, and proven production that Pittsburgh hadn't seen in years. His 992 yards in 2024 came despite inconsistent quarterback play in Seattle. Now he'd be catching passes from a 4-time MVP. Beside him, the supporting cast was deeper than it had been in years. Calvin Austin III had shown flashes of brilliance in 2024 with 548 yards and 4 touchdowns, displaying the kind of speed that could complement Metcalf's physicality. Veteran Robert Woods brought 12 years of experience and reliable hands. Roman Wilson, the 2024 third-round pick, who had essentially redshirted his rookie season due to injury, was finally healthy and ready to contribute. But perhaps the most underrated addition was Jonnu Smith at tight end. His productive year in Atlanta had come working with a Falcons offense that emphasized his versatility. Now he'd be reuniting with Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator, who had helped make him a weapon during his time in Tennessee. The Smith-Smith connection was crucial to understanding why the Steelers felt so confident about their offensive transformation. This would be the third time Jonnu had worked with Arthur as his play caller, and their previous collaborations had produced Smith's best football. Arthur Smith knew exactly how to use his tight end's unique blend of size, speed, and ball skills. Smith set a slew of career highs last season in an offense that emphasized his solid ability to win after the catch. Pro Football Focus noted in their analysis of the trade, Arthur Smith should have an easy time assimilating him into the offense. The tight end position was already strong with Pat Freiermuth, who had quietly put together a productive 2024 season with 653 yards and 7 touchdowns. Now, the Steelers had 2 legitimate receiving threats at the position, giving Arthur Smith the kind of flexibility that had made his offenses successful in Tennessee and briefly in Atlanta. The backfield featured Jaylen Warren, who had shown flashes of being a 3-down back, complemented by rookie Caleb Johnson from Iowa. Johnson brought a different skill set than Najee Harris. More physical, better ball security. He hadn't lost a fumble in 29 straight games, and the kind of mentality that fit the Steelers' identity. But the most important piece was under center. Aaron Rodgers was coming off a difficult tenure with the Jets, missing the entire 2023 season due to a torn Achilles and struggling to a 5-12 record in 2024, leaving serious questions about how much he had left. More importantly, over his final 10 games of 2024, Rodgers had thrown for 2,234 yards and 18 touchdowns against just 4 interceptions with a 64% completion percentage. Even a bad season for Aaron Rodgers is still pretty good. One NFL analyst noted, and an upgrade over what they got from the quarterback position last year. The key would be Arthur Smith's offensive system. Smith had built his reputation on play-action concepts and using multiple tight ends, both areas where Rodgers had historically excelled. The Steelers had used play-action on 27% of their dropbacks in 2024, the 10th highest rate in the NFL. But their execution had been inconsistent with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. Rodgers brought a different level of mastery to those concepts. In his 2020 MVP season, he led the league with a 9.1% touchdown rate on passing plays, showcasing his ability to sell the fake, manipulate safeties, and deliver strikes down the seam, skills that perfectly align with Arthur Smith's offensive design. The philosophical fit was obvious, but so were the challenges. Rodgers was joining his third team in 3 years, learning his third offensive system in that span, and doing so at an age when most quarterbacks had long since retired. The supporting cast was talented, but largely unproven together. The offensive line had lost key pieces in James Daniels and Dan Moore Jr., both of whom were not re-signed and entered free agency. Most importantly, the pressure was enormous. This wasn't a rebuilding year or a development season. It was a championship or bust campaign with a 41-year-old quarterback who had publicly stated it would be his last. "I'm pretty sure this is it," Rodgers said during an appearance on ESPN's The Pat McAfee Show. "That's why we just did the 1-year deal. Steelers didn't need to put any extra years on it or anything." The finite nature of the arrangement added urgency to everything. The Steelers couldn't afford a slow start or an adjustment period. They needed Rodgers and the new-look offense to click immediately. Defensively, the transformation was just as dramatic. The trade of Minkah Fitzpatrick had shocked fans, but it allowed the Steelers to create what might be the most talented secondary in the NFL. Jalen Ramsey brought elite coverage skills and the kind of versatility that defensive coordinator could use in multiple ways. Ramsey could line up outside opposite Joey Porter Jr., creating a formidable duo on the perimeter. He could slide into the slot, where his experience and football IQ would be invaluable against today's pass-heavy offenses. He could even drop down to safety in certain packages, giving the Steelers the kind of flexibility that championship defenses required. The addition of Darius Slay in free agency created an embarrassment of riches. The 34-year-old veteran signed to a 1-year, $10 million deal might have lost a step, but his experience and technique made him a valuable third option. Suddenly, the Steelers could match up with any receiving corps in the NFL. Up front, the pass rush remained elite. TJ Watt was still one of the most dominant players in football, even coming off a down season by his standards with 11.5 sacks. His 108 career sacks put him 6th among active players, and his ability to wreck games single-handedly remained unquestioned. The addition of rookie Derek Harmon gave the defense a new dimension up the middle. Cameron Hayward was still playing at an all-pro level at age 36, but having a young, disruptive presence beside him could extend to Hayward's effectiveness while providing insurance for the future. The Steelers' defensive line room went from a concern entering the season to a group with enough talent that the team released nose tackle Montravius Adams 2 days after the draft, one analyst noted, highlighting the depth that Khan had assembled. The pieces were all in place for something special. An elite defense anchored by TJ Watt and featuring one of the NFL's best secondaries. An offense with a Hall of Fame quarterback, a superstar receiver, and the kind of supporting cast that could complement their talents. A head coach who had never had a losing season and was desperate to finally break through in the playoffs. But championship windows in the NFL are fragile things. The Steelers knew they had assembled something special, but they also knew that 2025 might be their last best chance to capture that elusive 7th Super Bowl championship. The Kansas City Chiefs still ruled the AFC. The Baltimore Ravens had eliminated them from the playoffs the previous year. The Buffalo Bills and Cincinnati Bengals weren't going anywhere. Even with all their acquisitions, the Steelers would need everything to go right to make a championship run. As the Steelers prepared for training camp in late July 2025, one massive question still loomed over the entire renaissance. What would happen with TJ Watt? The reigning Defensive Player of the Year and face of the franchise was entering the final season of his 4-year, $112 million contract, and he wasn't happy about it. Watt had skipped voluntary OTAs, missed mandatory minicamp, and watched from afar as his division rival Myles Garrett reset the pass rush market with a stunning 4-year, $160 million extension that made him the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history at $40 million per year. Meanwhile, Watt was still making $28 million annually on a deal signed in 2021. While clearly underpaid compared to Garrett's new record-setting deal, exact details of Watt's contract demands weren't publicly known, although Pittsburgh indicated an extension was a top priority. Teams are discussing whether they can trade for Steelers standout pass rusher TJ Watt. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported in late June, sending shockwaves through Steelers Nation. Multiple teams had called Pittsburgh to inquire about his availability, recognizing that an unhappy superstar in the final year of his deal might be available. But the Steelers' response was immediate and definitive. Pittsburgh hasn't shown any willingness to deal Watt so far, Schefter noted, and NFL Network's Tom Pelissero confirmed it. The Steelers have no intention of trading star pass rusher TJ Watt, and their focus remains on extending Watt's contract. The message was clear. The Steelers weren't trading their best player during a championship push, but that didn't solve the underlying problem. Watt wanted to be paid like the elite player he was, and the Steelers needed to find a way to make it work without destroying their salary cap. The timeline was crucial. Historically, the Steelers had waited until the final moments to get deals done with their star players. Pat Freiermuth and Cameron Hayward had both signed extensions just days before the 2024 season started. Watt himself had waited until September 9th, 2021, 3 days before the season opener, to sign his current deal. My gut says the Steelers signed Watt to an extension after the last preseason game and before the regular season kicks off. Steelers insider Mike DeFabo wrote, based on how Omar Khan handled Pat Freiermuth and Cameron Hayward last year. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler was even more optimistic about Watt's future earnings. My sense is that he will probably be the highest paid pass rusher in the league when this is all said and done, Fowler reported. He wants to be a Steeler for life. The Steelers want that. He's a legacy type player. The projection made sense. If Garrett was worth $40 million per year, then Watt, with superior production and a longer track record, should command even more. A 3-year extension worth around $125 million seemed realistic, which would make him the highest paid edge rusher in history while keeping him in Pittsburgh through his mid-30s. But the Watt situation highlighted the broader challenge facing the Steelers. They had committed enormous resources to the 2025 season, and there were no guarantees it would work. The betting markets reflected that reality. Despite all their moves, Pittsburgh's Super Bowl odds sat at plus 4,500, good for about a 2.2% chance of winning it all. Their win total was set at 8.5 games, right in the middle of expectations. The AFC North odds had them third behind Baltimore and Cincinnati. Rodgers was baked into the current price. BetMGM trading manager Christian Cipollini explained when the odds didn't move after Rodgers' signing. It was assumed he would sign there. The lack of market movement spoke to both the excitement and the skepticism surrounding the Steelers' transformation. Yes, they had added talent. Yes, they had addressed their quarterback problem, but they had also bet everything on a 41-year-old quarterback coming off a disappointing season, surrounded their aging core with expensive veterans, and committed massive resources to a one-year window. The historical context made the pressure even more intense. The Steelers were one of the NFL's flagship franchises, tied with the New England Patriots for the most Super Bowl victories in history with 6. But their last championship had come after the 2008 season, and their last playoff victory dated to January 15th, 2017. Mike Tomlin's streak of non-losing seasons was remarkable, 18 years without a record below .500, but it also highlighted his playoff struggles, just one Super Bowl appearance since 2010, and 0 playoff wins since beating Kansas City in the divisional round following the 2016 season. The Steelers haven't won a playoff game since 2016, became the refrain that haunted every discussion about the franchise. For an organization that prided itself on championship excellence, 8 years without a playoff victory felt like an eternity. The 2025 season represented their best chance to break that drought in years, perhaps their last, with this core group. TJ Watt would be 31 in October. Cameron Hayward was already 36. The defensive nucleus that had carried them through the lean quarterback years wouldn't be elite forever. If the renaissance worked, if Rodgers played like a Hall of Famer, if the new receivers clicked immediately, if the defense stayed healthy and dominant, the Steelers could realistically compete with anyone in the AFC. The Chiefs were still the standard, but Kansas City had shown vulnerability. Baltimore was talented but inconsistent. Buffalo was dangerous but hadn't gotten over the hump. A successful 2025 season could validate Omar Khan's aggressive approach and establish a new template for how the Steelers operated. It could give Mike Tomlin his second Super Bowl and cement his legacy as one of the great coaches in franchise history. It could send Aaron Rodgers out on top, adding a second championship to cap a Hall of Fame career. But if it failed, if Rodgers looked his age, if the chemistry never developed, if injuries derailed the season, the consequences would be severe. The Steelers would have mortgaged significant draft capital and salary cap space for a one-year rental that didn't work. They'd be facing a rebuild with limited resources and an aging core. Looking ahead to the schedule, the early tests would be crucial. Opening at the New York Jets against Aaron Rodgers' former team would be a media circus. Oh, and an immediate measuring stick. Road games at New England and a neutral site game in Dublin against Minnesota would test their resolve. The AFC North remained loaded with Baltimore, Cincinnati, and even Cleveland potentially improved. The Steelers' projected win total of 8.5 games seemed almost insulting given the talent they'd assembled, but it reflected the reality of competing in a loaded conference. Every game would matter. Every mistake could be costly. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. But that's what made the Renaissance so compelling. After 3 years of quarterback mediocrity and playoff disappointment, the Pittsburgh Steelers had finally swung for the fences. Omar Khan had abandoned the conservative approach that had defined the franchise for decades, betting everything on one final championship push. They had traded away their all-pro safety for a veteran cornerback and elite tight end. They had committed $150 million to a receiver who had never played a down in Pittsburgh. They had signed a 41-year-old quarterback coming off a disappointing season. They had drafted for immediate impact rather than long-term development. It was the most un-Steelers-like offseason in franchise history. And that was exactly the point. The old way wasn't working. 3 years of patient development and conservative moves had produced exactly 0 playoff victories. Sometimes revolutionary times called for revolutionary measures. I believe we are building a championship roster, Omar Khan had said when he signed his contract extension. Not a competitive roster, not a playoff roster, a championship roster. The pieces were in place. Aaron Rodgers under center for his final season. DK Metcalf providing the deep threat they'd lacked for years. Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith adding Pro Bowl talent on both sides of the ball. TJ Watt anchoring a defense that could be historically good when healthy. For the first time since Ben Roethlisberger's prime, the Pittsburgh Steelers had assembled a roster capable of competing for a championship. Whether they could actually capture that elusive 7th Lombardi trophy remained the billion-dollar question that would define the next 6 months. The Steel City hadn't been this excited about football in a decade. The national media was taking notice. The betting markets were showing respect. After years of being overlooked and underestimated, the Steelers were relevant again. But championships aren't won in July. They're earned through the grinding months of a 17-game season, through the pressure of playoff football, through the moments when everything is on the line and only the best survive. The Pittsburgh Steelers' renaissance was complete. The roster was assembled. The window was open. Now came the hardest part of all, actually winning when it mattered most. In a league where championship windows open and close in the blink of an eye, where one injury can derail a season and one mistake can end a decade of preparation, the Steelers were betting everything on the next 6 months. It was either going to be the most brilliant gamble in franchise history or the most expensive lesson about the dangers of putting all your eggs in one very expensive basket. The renaissance was real. The talent was undeniable. The window was open. Whether the Pittsburgh Steelers could finally capture that 7th Super Bowl championship, or whether they become the most talented team to fall short, would be answered soon enough. One way or another, 2025 would be a season that Steelers fans would never forget. So what do you think? Is this finally the year the Steelers break their playoff drought and make a championship run? Can Aaron Rodgers turn back the clock for one final magical season? Will Omar Khan's aggressive approach pay off? Or will this expensive gamble blow up in their faces? And most importantly, do you believe this collection of talent can actually deliver that elusive 7th Super Bowl to Pittsburgh? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the Steelers' remarkable transformation, smash that like button, subscribe for more NFL content, and don't forget to hit the bell icon for notifications. Check out the videos on your screen for more stories about NFL rebuilds and championship chases. Until next time, this has been the story of how the Pittsburgh Steelers went from quarterback chaos to championship contenders in the most dramatic offseason in franchise history.